Hey everyone, welcome back. No, it's not a motorcycle. It's a 68 Plymouth GTX.
A momentum, a beat, and the beat goes on.
Plymouth, when you over, beat goes on.
68 GTX, one of the new mid-size 5.
About a year ago, I put out the word that I had pulled this car out of a barn and planned to restore it. And over the course of the past year that I've been working on it, I have received thousands of messages from you guys wanting to see the progress on the GTX. Now, throughout that entire process, I realized this car has quite a story to it. And so I want to bring you along for the ride, show you what we've had to do to get it to this point, and then hopefully we'll be able to get it finished sometime in the next few months. So stick around. Let's get started. I've known where this car was sitting for over 10 years. It hasn't seen the road since 1978, and as a matter of fact, here's the license plate that I took off of it. The car came out of the St. Louis plant, and it came straight to Atlanta, and it was driven until 1978 and then parked. It sat in a barn for about 30 years. Someone pulled the car out of that barn and started a restoration project on it. Now, they had completely gutted the car. Had a hard time finding so many of the components that were missing from it, and spent several trips going through rat-infested barns to find bits and pieces, but for the most part found virtually all the original components that came off the car. So it has not seen the road since 1978. Now, when I pulled it out of the barn, it was interesting because the paint and body work had already been done at that point, and it's a rust-free car, all original sheet metal car. It's amazing that it had been preserved as well as it has. You know, most of these old Mopars, they're completely rusted out in Swiss cheese. But they had replaced the passenger side floor pans back when they started the restoration, but the wiring harness was gutted, the entire interior was gutted, and then for whatever reason, when they decided to bead blast the car before doing the paint, they left the entire dash in the car. They left the windows in the car. So everything that I've taken out of it was either piles of rat poop or it had sand in it, even down to inside the speedometer cable. Pretty crazy. So when I got it here, I started going through it and realized, yes, it is a real GTX from 68, manufactured in March of 68. It's a 440, 4-barrel, 4-speed. So you have a Dana 60 rear end, then you also have an 833 4-speed. And then one of my difficulties with this was authenticating the car. Now, there's no question the VIN number is correct. And actually on your radiator core support, there's a sequence number stamped into that core support. There's also a sequence number on the trunk rail underneath the weather strip. And the challenge in authenticating the car, almost all Mopars, they have a body tag on the inner fender over here, and that body tag represents all the options that went into the car. Now, I know this is the original inner fender that's in it, but there was no body tag. And there's no signs that holes were ever drilled. They had 2 holes, and they would put them in with Phillips head screws. And there's no sign there were holes ever even there. So one has to assume that this car never had a body tag on it. But after getting the car home, going through it, realizing the equipment I was dealing with, realizing it had all the super stock springs on the back and everything was correct, even components that you can't get anymore, like the dash trim, for example, that has a little GTX logo in it. You can't buy that stuff. There's no reproduction for those things. Other things like the 150 mile an hour speedometer, you know, all the clues pointed to this being a real authentic car. And so I didn't have any of the interior. So I called the fellow that I bought the car from and asked if I could go dig through some of his barns. And I spent days going through multiple barns, again, through rat poop. Gallons of it, rat poop, and found the original interior. Well, come to find out, the fellow that had purchased this car new intended to race it. So when he put the car on the road, the first thing he did was gut the interior. So I found all of the original interior, which was able to restore and bring it back. And that original interior looks absolutely fabulous. I'm absolutely blown away by it. But underneath the seat, I was able to find the coveted build sheet. Can you believe it? So I found the build sheet, but there was one problem with the build sheet. I had the sequence number, most of the sequence number, only missing a couple of digits. Now that sequence number on the build sheet matches the sequence number on the radiator core support, and it also matches the sequence number underneath on the trunk rail weather strip underneath there on the quarter panel. So I knew I had an authentic build sheet that matched the car, everything else. The VIN number missing 3 digits. Unfortunately, the rats got to the build sheet, I guess, and it deteriorated, but they didn't touch the seats. Some of the things that they did when they started the restoration, like for example, the underside of the car, you know, they put, you know, coated everything with undercoating. And then you also notice the trunk has rust prevention coatings inside the trunk. Now, proper for this car would be to have a painted trunk to match body color, but you'll notice it's black. I know that's not correct. You'll also notice that the core support is black and it's not blue, which would be correct. But because I don't have that body tag, and because the car was in such incredible condition when I got it, I made the decision not to do a concourse restoration. The car is just, it's a fantastic car just the way that it is. So I'm not doing a full rotisserie type of restoration. And back in, you know, again, almost 20 years ago, they had already done all, you know, a lot of the suspension stuff had already been done, you know, bushings and things like that. So I decided just to make this car a really, really nice, spectacular driver. And instead of doing a complete rotisserie, you know, correct restoration on it, it is what it is, right? It's you know, what fits in the budget and you know, and what you plan on doing with the car in the end. So my plan is to drive it. So before we get started, what I want to do here is tell you a little bit more about the history of the GTX. I actually came across some old advertisement.
What a lineup! What a team for 1968. You've got to see it in action. The GTX will outrun the rest of the supercars.
Turning on the starter of this one is like lighting a fuse. Here's the explosive. The mighty Super Commando 440 cubic inch engine, the standard engine in the GTX. Wow. Those dual air scoops on the hood are standard. That black hood treatment and those special road wheels are optional. Bright dual exhausts, red Scotch-Lite inserts in the deck lid, heavy-duty suspension, oversized brakes, 150-mile-per-hour speedometer, all standard on GTX.
Last year, over 250,000 owners of other low-priced cars were won over to Plymouth.
Since we're kind of coming in midstream on the project, I would say, I thought I would give you guys a bit of a tour. So I've started on the inside and I'm working my way out with a lot of details to go here. Now when I got the car, the interior was completely stripped out of it. Most of the parts and pieces were missing. No door panels, no interior. The window regulators completely full of sand and dirt and rat crap and rats nests everywhere. The car was completely infested. So I went through and rust proofed. You can see this area right here. Went through and rust proofed the entire floor, sanded everything, and got rid of all the rust there. And then I've started putting down sound deadening material and applying rust proofing, rust encapsulator all along the back there at that panel. Now on the passenger side, I have already stripped all the window regulators out and all of the glass, and we've got that. And you'll notice the paint here. When the fella had painted the car, he mistakenly painted around the door frame in blue, and it's supposed to be interior color, which for this car the code is actually a black interior. We've got that done, and you can see down in there I've put sound deadening material inside the door, and all the regulators are going to get rebuilt, and all the locks and latches and that sort of thing. So then I moved to the dash. Now the challenge with the dash here has been, again, when they were going at the car, they had left all of the gauges, the radio, the glove box, everything inside the dash, and then media blasted the body, which meant everything in this dash is completely full of sand. And of course, all the rats had gotten underneath the dash in here and chewed up all of the insulation everywhere. So at this point, I have stripped the dash completely, pulled out the wiring harness and the switches, and had to rebuild the switches and such. Today I'm going to pull the steering column, and what I've got to do is clean up this dash, and I'll be sanding all of it. Of course, I pulled the dash pad off the top here, and I'll be sanding all of this down and then painting it a matte black finish. Now, all of this will be hidden behind the trim, but regardless, I still want to paint it and rust protect it and all that type of stuff. And then I've also got the heater box and all the internals out of it there. I've got the windshield wiper motor out, all the windshield wiper linkages, and I'll get in here and take all the pedal assemblies out, get all the sand and dirt out of them, rebuild them, lubricate them, and then of course we'll work our way under here to the emergency brake assembly. Again, it's all completely full of sand and such, so we'll get that out of there, put in a new dimmer switch, and then I'll keep going with all the sound deadening material. Now, another thing, it's amazing where all mice can get when a car is in storage. So if we take a look at the headliner, or where the headliner was, I'd stripped the headliner. Now in the center here, the rats had actually nested on top of the headliner. So there was bad surface rust all along this roof panel here. So then I stripped all the rust there, put rust encapsulator on it, and of course you can tell it put Dynamat up there. And it makes quite a considerable difference. It's hard to tell without a before and after, but it made quite a bit of difference. So now that we finished the tail lights and got those mounted up, I'll go to the back and give you another little quick view of that. Now we're gonna work on stripping out the steering column so that we can refinish the steering wheel. Then we'll paint the column, clean out the rest of the dash, and we will be ready to start reassembling the dash. And here on the rear, we've gotten the tail light panel installed along the trunk. We've got our tail light assemblies in already. Installed a bumper, new bumper. The original ones were just in horrible condition. And of course, restored a 1968 license plate. I have to do that on all of my cars, so the back end looks fantastic. And we start working our way around. This is an all original sheet metal car with zero rust in it, which is astounding for a Mopar if you know these well enough. So you know, preserving this original sheet metal was important. But the wheel well moldings were missing, so we've got wheel well moldings installed, and the GTX emblem. Now when they painted the car, for whatever reason, they had filled the original holes. But when you go and you look on the back side of this quarter panel, you can see the holes were once there. So I had to re-drill those holes and get the GTX emblem in. And then we also, midstream here on putting in the drip rail moldings here all the way around, and then the windshield moldings. They were not with the car either. I had to buy reproductions of those. And with any reproduction part, you know, fitment isn't always perfect. So on this side, I'm gonna have to pull this piece back off and massage the crease in this here just a little bit to get it to... I haven't decided yet if I want to put a white vinyl top on this car. I think it would look incredibly elegant, but I would love to hear your comments, and you guys let me know what you think about a white vinyl top on this old girl. So anyway, I've got to get got the hood inserts painted, and then I've got the 440 emblem that goes in there, just waiting on the hardware. And then we've got the front wheel well moldings, of course. We've got new marker lamps front and rear installed. Then we work our way to the front. These grills are very fragile, so I have repainted this grill, and you can see it's bent up a little bit here, and you know, compared to this side. And it's actually not bent quite as bad as it looks. There's some hardware missing inside here that's on back order that I'm waiting on. And once that hardware is in there, this panel will lift up. So it's not bent as bad as it appears. But once I get that hardware and get that in place, and get the hood lined up perfectly and closed. Then I'll work on this to get that exactly where it's supposed to be. I mean, this stuff is just really, you know, really thin. The front bumper brackets were missing, so got the bumper brackets in finally, and those installed, and the front bumper, so it's shaping up well. Got our Plymouth emblem there on the hood, and then under here you can actually see the original bumper in the state that it was in. It just, you know, it took a little bit of a bump right there somewhere, and so it's, you know, these days AMD is fantastic. Auto Metal Direct, their bumpers fitment and likeness to original equipment is astounding, and it's actually much less expensive to buy a new bumper than it is to re-chrome one. So I did get a new bumper on there. Of course, we got the new forward lighting harness, engine lighting harness. Now this car was originally a 440 4-barrel car, and now it's the 440s in this particular model, the 440 4-barrel in 68. The engine should have been turquoise, would be the correct color. So at some point someone had pulled the engine and painted it orange, but you know, 69, the 440 6-pack cars and all the Hemi cars were always orange. So for whatever reason, someone decided to paint this engine orange, which is not correct. You can see the color under there. And I did have this Holly carb, and I pulled off the 600 carb that was on it, and this Holly 750 is the one that was on the Chevelle over there before I fuel injected it. So I thought this would be a perfect fit, and then we'll be good to go. One thing you'll notice, this is not the original equipment radiator, and I'm not a fan of that at all. But I am on the hunt for an original radiator for this, to return that back to the way it's supposed to be. And then once I do that, of course, when I detail the entire engine bay, all the correct looms, the correct wire routing and all that type of stuff will be done in here when I do that, in a correct tar top battery. Then I'll go through and, you know, all this area up here should be painted blue, which would be, you know, body color. So that'll get painted. And an interesting thing, you know, a lot of times when people restore cars, they try to get them too perfect. And, you know, paint details, everything laid out. But you have to remember, these cars were built on a production line. So things like this area here on the radiator core support, you know, the way this car was built on an assembly line, there was a guy underneath the car with a spray gun spraying up to spray all of that black up in there. So in the real world, what you would have actually seen back then is where this core support was in the car, the top part would have been, you know, blue body color, but then you had the guy on the line spraying the black. So there would actually be black overspray all over here and black overspray down in here, just, you know, overspray everywhere in this area. And so, you know, it kind of makes it easier to restore one, but, you know, when you see them too perfect, perfect is actually not correct. Back in the day, the body lines on these cars didn't line up. You know, the gaps were huge in some places, narrow in others. So, you know, we have to, you know, kind of think about that stuff. It's not about necessarily visual perfection when you're trying to restore one. It's more about just being, you know, as correct as you can be. Well, the reason that they painted all of that black there was, you know, down here when you look through the grill, you know, so it looks black through it. And a lot of times you'll see on some of these cars where they left all of that in their body color, and you can actually see body color through the grill. And if you have an eye for that and you look for it, oh man, it just looks horrible. It just, you can tell it just doesn't look right. But anyway, so the bulkhead connector right there for the wiring harness, it's out. You know, it comes through the firewall there. And I've got a good bit of wiring and things to do.
And the Plymouth Win You Over beat goes on.